we are going to be doing meiosis. It's not the traditional note. It's really kind of a case study where we learn about meiosis through this case study. There is this paper that you'll need to fill out as we go along. And then at the end, you're going to consider the following question. The Y chromosome is an accurate indicator of a person's external sex organs. Do you agree or disagree with the statement? State a claim that addresses the question and support that claim with evidence and reasoning. So kind of like the CERs, but you're working a little bit backwards. You're coming up, yeah. So anyways, once we go through this, I mean, I've seen kids go in all ranges of what they think, and at the end, we'll just kind of see where you stand. Once again, I always tell them in class that it is okay to feel how you feel, and it's okay to have different opinions, and that's all right. We're just looking at the science behind it. Okay, so the case study, the big question is, how is gender determined, which is kind of a hot topic right now. Is it possible for someone to have an external appearance that does not match the chromosomal sex? So is that possible? And we'll walk through and figure out what's going on with meiosis in this process. So first, let's get through some definitions first. Meiosis is by which the haploid cells are created, and by haploid we mean they have half the number of chromosomes. I can't talk. So if you look here, this zygote right here, it has, if it's a human, it would have 46 chromosomes, 23 pair. But an egg or a sperm only has half the number. That's why it says 1N right here. It will only have 23, right? That's what it has to be. Imagine if an egg and a sperm had 46. When they combined, you would have a baby that had 92 chromosomes. So that can't work. So the sperm and egg, they eventually combine though, and they do then when they're 23 and 23, when they combine, you have that single egg then with 46 chromosomes. And then you go through a bunch of mitosis, so all your cells should have 46 chromosomes. Alleles on these chromosomes determine the traits and the sex of the offspring. So each of these chromosomes have alleles. So you could have the allele for red hair or the allele for brown hair. But there's a bunch of alleles. Think of all the different traits about us as humans. As simple as are your earlobes attached or not? Can you roll your tongue? Do you have freckles? Like all of this is on your chromosomes. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Let me erase this. Here. All right, so in 2006, Santhai Soundarajan, I know I just probably mutilated her name, won the silver medal in the 800-meter race at the Asian Games in Qatar. Following her silver medal performance, her sex was officially questioned. So there is an actual news here where you can go and look at this from BBC. Indian athlete fails gender test. And so it goes through and it talks, I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but basically a top Indian woman athlete who won a silver medal at a recent regional championship has failed a gender test, officials say. All right, so let's go back to this. How do you know if someone is male or female? That is a tricky thing right now. You're going to talk to the person next to you and identify characteristics that distinguish males from females. Once again, this is just kind of what you think. It's not what is right or wrong. This is what do you think. I'm not telling you that one way is right or wrong. It's just in your head, what do you feel? So I'll give them a second to kind of discuss this, and once again, nobody's answer is better than anybody else's. We're just simply, what are we conditioned to say? All right, so how is sex determined in humans? Anatomy, primary and secondary sexual characteristics. So usually how sex is determined in humans is we look for genitalia, we look for body hair, the pelvis, I mean you can tell like bone structure, different things like that. Physiology, the function and interaction of the sex organs, including concentrations of sex hormones. So what kind of hormones do you have in your body? Such as estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Contrast also gives us clues when regarding faces. Which one of these faces is a female? So usually the students will determine one is, normally everybody kind of goes with the same picture, but in truth, this is the same picture, just one has darkened up a little bit more than the other one. So it's actually the same person. Does she have female genitalia? Yes. Does she have breast and pubic hair? Yes. Does she have a regular menstrual cycle? Never. But does that alone determine if you're male or female? When they're looking at this for the Olympics, we see a lot of runners that don't have regular menstruation because of that they run. Testosterone levels are 180 nanograms per deciliter according to the National Institute of Health. The normal range of testosterone is 30 to 95 for women, and for men it's 300 to 1200. So if you look, it is higher, double the amount for women, but she's also not at a man's level either, or a male level. So based on this information, would you determine that Cynthia is male or female? Now this, we usually have kids or we may see some disagreement. It's funny how we start to see kids, though, as we go through this slide, they start to change their stance, they start to think differently, or they change their mind several times throughout this. But right now, where are you at? All right, so is there another way that sex is determined? So we can look at chromosomes. In humans, females possess 2 X chromosomes, and males have an XY. Now this usually will determine whether you're going to have estrogen, testosterone, all that good stuff. So look at this, just this missing an X chromosome and having this Y here instead changes so much about your physical appearance, your chemical balance in your body is all based on that one chromosome there. All right, so here's a karyotype, which is just a picture of all your chromosomes lined up. So autosomes are chromosomes that are not the X and Y. They are your body cells, or the chromosomes that make up your body cells. Humans have 22 pairs, so you can see up here 1 through 22, and then if you look at the top picture here, that is a female, you can see the XX. Now look at it versus the male, who is XY here. So that Y is a lot smaller, so that's how we can tell that according to this chromosome in the picture, they have an XY and would be considered a male. All right, so if this were a karyotype from Xanthi's blood cells, would you determine Xanthi as a male or a female? So looking at that, it definitely looks like there's an XY there, right? XY. But you have to remember that she had a lot of female traits. She just did not, she had female genitalia. She just didn't have menstrual cycles, but her testosterone levels were a little bit high for a woman. But then you look at the karyotype, and if you look at the karyotype, it's definitely saying XY. So if this were a karyotype, yeah, is Xanthi a male or female according to that? So can the process of meiosis result in a zygote that has a Y chromosome but have an external female appearance? How does that happen? So can Xanthi still be a female even though it's showing XY? So there's something called sexual dimorphism. It's more obvious in some animals. So you see where, oh gosh, dimorphism meaning 2. So they can have 2, like you can have a male and female there. How sex cells are created. So this is really where the meiosis comes into play. So the purpose of meiosis in animals anyway is to produce egg and sperm, which are called gametes. And we want just half. We already talked about that, why we want just half of the chromosomes to make them haploid. If you don't have the chromosomes, you have entirely too many for the baby. So if you look at this, we have interphase, we have our chromosomes here. Now we know that the first thing we do in interphase is we make their synthesis. They're making chromosomes. So if you go to right here, this second circle here, we now have double the chromosomes. You can see where they have made copies of themselves to be there. Now they go through PMAP, and they'll call this meiosis 1, which is right here. And if you look, they have separated. We have one red one went to one. We have another red went to another. Now here's the thing. This, you see this blue piece right here? You see that the red and blue are now mixed? During meiosis 1, you can get something called crossing over, and that is literally where your chromosomes may, like their arms, kind of cross over and they just switch spots. And this really makes how much variety we have in our species. It can be accounted a lot to this because of this crossing over. All right, then we go through PMAT, again, just like we did in mitosis, meiosis 2, and we have to go through this a second time, and this is to give us those haploid cells. I'm sounding really southern today, guys. So here, I now have 4. These 2 came from this one right here. I have another 2 here. So I have 4 cells altogether. Now look at this cell versus the original. It does have half the number of chromosomes, and that's the whole purpose. That's what we want. All right, so basically meiosis is going through mitosis twice. You go from 1 to 2 cells, and then you go through meiosis again and go from 2 cells to 4 cells. Now for men, they have 4 sperm that they make. For women, we have 4, there are like 4 eggs. There's one larger that is our egg, and then we have 3 what are called polar bodies, and they end up just being waste. So we truly only make 1 egg out of that. Independent assortment. During meiosis, homologous pairs are randomly distributed to the 4 daughter cells. What that means, independent assortment, is like it's not like this one has to go here. They can independently assort however they want to. This could have went over here, so that's what they're showing us, this or that. Your brown eyes don't necessarily have to go with the black hair. Look at this, you could have black hair with blue eyes. So that's independently assorted. You can see the difference from this side here to this side here, the differences. Alright, so it's not like one chromosome has to go, it's not like they come as paired buddies, like, oh, this chromosome number 1 and this chromosome number 5 have to come together. That's not the case. Alright, crossing over, I just kind of talked about that a second ago. Chiasma is what it's called. It increases variability, so it's also called recombination. But this, like I said, this gives this variability in our species as humans or other organisms. A lot of that can be accounted to this. So if you look here, we have a homologous pair, and look how they kind of start crossing right here. And it's just like they take little pieces of each other and attach to themselves. So you can see that that is happening, and then by the time you get down here to your 4 egg or sperm, you have a chromosome that does not look like the original chromosome. Once again, just gives us a little bit more variability to the human race and to the types of kids you can have. Also, alright, the side here is just showing, you can see that's called recombinant chromatids now when they do that. Now I'm not saying this happens every time, this can happen, and I'm not saying that it always happens, but it can. Alright, so this is how sex is determined. You have a male up here at the top that has an XY. They have 2 sperm, right? They have a sperm that's either going to give an X and make a daughter, or they have a sperm that will be a Y and will make a son. It all depends on which sperm fertilizes the egg. Now mom can only give X's. All of her eggs have an X chromosome. So it just depends on what sperm meets up with the egg. Depends on if you're going to have a girl or a boy. Alright, non-disjunction. Chromatids or homologs, if you call them chromatids, homologs mean the same chromosome. They do not separate during the process. Daughter cells either have too many or too few chromosomes. So let's look at what this is. If you're looking exactly what's going on, we have our cell. Let's go through interphase. Here we're going to go through PMAT1. And, PMAT1. I'm sorry, give me a second here. PMAT1, this is PMAT2. We've got our 4 egg cells. But look what happens during anaphase. During anaphase, these did not split and go into separate cells. They split and went into the same cell. So now you have a cell here with 2 chromosomes, and you have 1 with nothing. So then, these are eggs. So then when the sperm comes, oh, I'm sorry, let me scroll back. Oh, there we go. All right, so then when the sperm comes and fertilizes this egg, look at this one. You have an XXY. Here you just have a Y. You don't even have an X. It's just a Y chromosome. Let's look at over here. Look what happened here from the get-go. Now this is if it happens after a PMAT1. Here, right away, we get this. So look at all these cells over here. You have 2 egg cells that have no X's in them. But then you have 2 cells over here that have X, X, Y. Now, we saw Xanthai's, if that was her karyotype, we saw the picture. It looked like there was an X and a Y, so it doesn't look like this is what happened to her, although we're not really for sure if that was her real karyotype. But is this a possibility? I mean, could this have happened, and could this be why she has the symptoms or the stuff going on that she does? All right, here's Klinefelter syndrome. We just saw that a second ago, an XXY. So Klinefelter syndrome, you're taller than average height, you have reduced facial hair, reduced body hair, you do have breast development, you get this like feminine fat kind of distribution. You do have testes though. So it's almost like you kind of have some female attributes, but you also have some male attributes. But you have both of those X chromosomes, but you also have that Y. So based on the evidence so far, the same guy have this syndrome. So once again, the students will kind of talk amongst themselves. It'll probably take us a good 2 days to get through this. Your class is really good at talking about the stuff that is up here. So how does the Y chromosome determine the development of male characteristics? So that's the big thing here. If you have a Y chromosome, like what exactly does it do differently for a male versus a female? So the chromosome theory of inheritance is a fundamental theory of genetics which identifies chromosomes as the carriers, which we know. So basically it's saying the Y chromosome, it's a chromosome, so it's going to carry genetics, different genetics than what an XX has. So could there be a gene on the Y chromosome that determines male traits? Well, if that's the only difference between male and female, this XX and XY, then what do you think? Do you think that the Y has that many traits to make males that much different than females? All right, so there's an SRY, a sex-determined region of the Y chromosome gene. So early in development, the immature gonads of males and females are indistinguishable. So that's why at a certain time in pregnancy, like they might not be able to tell if your baby's a male or a female. In the 7th week of development, the SRY gene on the Y chromosome activates and the gonads develop as testes. So really up until the 7th week of pregnancy, you're really not sure unless that happens a little bit quicker. It's not, it's not, the 7th week exactly all the time, like things develop differently. But females without this gene develop ovaries instead. So basically, if you are a male and you have this Y chromosome, you have this gene right here that makes you develop gonads. If you do not have the Y gene and you have 2 X's, you don't have that gene, you develop ovaries instead of that. All right, so that is the big thing. Yes, there are genes on this Y chromosome that make you different. So is it possible then that Xanthai is female even though she has a Y chromosome? So then at that point, like I'll ask the kids this, and so many of them have different viewpoints, which is great. I love having these discussions. But some will say no, an XY individual is always male. Some will say yes if she has an additional X chromosome. Some will say yes if the gene is located on one of her X chromosomes. Yeah, what if there was non-disjunction? What if there was a crossing over and that gene got put on her X chromosome? Yes, if the SRY gene is missing or broken. So, what they have to pick one of these, or is there something else? There's another option that you have that's not up here. I will say this, like, I've always been like XXXY, like that's what it is, but when you read some of this and what we find out with Xanthai, it's like, it can be a lot more involved. All right, so could the SRY gene end up on the X chromosome during crossing over? So it says crossing over can occur anywhere along the autosomes. So look at this. Look at this right here. So what if in a sperm, like when you're going through meiosis to make sperm, this right here gets crossed over to the X chromosome. Now dad gives this X chromosome like it's going to be a daughter, but the daughter has this gene. Look at this. XX, it looks female, but it has this gene that is going to produce gonads instead of ovaries. you look at just XX or XY? And obviously this isn't going to be the case for everybody, but what do you do then? So they would then kind of converse and talk about these two questions here. All right, so 46 means 46 chromosomes. It means that you have XY. So this is just telling us that you have 46 chromosomes, you have the XY chromosome, and it says SRY negative. It means it's not there. So guys, Xanthi has an X and a Y, and this SR gene is just not there. It's gone. So it's negative. So you have the Y gene, and the Y gene is supposed to give you this SRY gene that gives you some of these male characteristics, like gonads and stuff like that, but it's missing. So technically it looks like she would be a male when you look at her genetics, but then you have that gene gone. So how would you determine if Xanthi had this syndrome? So how do we look? How do we know if she has a syndrome? And so we'll discuss that in class, like what is going on with that. And then if you were a member of the Asian Games Medal Committee and Xanthi's karyotype revealed that she is XY, but negative, what do you do? She has female genitalia, allow her to keep her medal. She's genetically male, take her medal away. She is female, the SRY gene is inactive, right? Because really the Y gene, that gene that you want off the Y that makes you like have some of these male characteristics is not there. Or is there a different answer that you might have? So if you're still confused, check out this TED Ed video. So we'll look at this. This is really interesting because it talks about different types of organisms and how they tell what they are. I'm going to exit full screen real quick and see. Okay, I'll come back to this video here in a second. All right, so in 2016, Xanthi disclosed she has androgen insensitivity syndrome. So I would ask the kids, what do you think that means? And they would kind of talk and discuss, but then I'm going to tell them what that is. It's when a person who is genetically male, who has an X and a Y chromosome, is resistant to male hormones called androgens. As a result, the person has some or all of the physical traits of a woman, but the genetic makeup of a man. So if she has this, should she be allowed to keep her medal and compete? Now, everybody's going to have their differing opinions. Once again, that is fine. Just kind of like, what do you think? Like, this is tough. This is not cut and dry. This is not XX or XY. Like, there's other things going on outside of that. So we'll discuss and we'll kind of see what the class decides, or if they don't decide the same, we'll see. The gene is located on the X chromosome, so you can see right here the X chromosome. Whether you're a male or a female, you have that gene right there. Here's an affected individual. All right, so what do you think about requiring gender testing for female athletes in internal competition? Once again, this is a hot topic. This is something that's been discussed a lot in years right now. Should it be banned? Is it necessary to ensure an even playing field? Should it be required for all athletes, both male and female? What do you think? Like, this was in the news a lot, even, gosh, was it 2 years ago in track and field. So what do you think should happen with that? So I'm going to go back, I'm going to play this video, and then we will be done with the notes.
My wife is pregnant right now with our first child, and when people see her with her big baby bump, the first question people ask, almost without fail, is it a boy or is it a girl? Now, there's some assumptions behind that question that we take for granted because of our familiarity with our own human biology. For human babies, we take it for granted that there's a 50-50 chance of either answer, boy or girl. But why is it that way? Well, the answer depends on the sex determination system that has evolved for our species. You see, for most mammals, the sex of a baby is determined genetically with the XY chromosome system. Mammals have a pair of sex chromosomes, one passed down from mom and one from dad. A pair of X's gives us a girl, and an X and a Y together gives us a boy. Since females only have X's to pass on in their egg cells, and males can give either an X or a Y in their sperm cells, the sex is determined by the father, and the chance of producing a male or a female is 50-50. This system has worked well for mammals, but throughout the tree of life, we can see other systems that have worked just as well for other animals. There are other groups of animals that also have genetic sex determination, but their systems can be pretty different from ours. Birds and some reptiles have their sex genetically determined, but instead of the sex being determined by dad, their sex is determined by mom. In those groups, a pair of Z sex chromosomes produces a male. So these males only have Zs to give. However, in these animals, one Z and one W chromosome together as a pair produces a female. In this system, the chance of a male or a female is still 50-50. It just depends on whether mom puts a Z or a W into her egg. Certain groups have taken genetic sex determination in completely other directions. Ants, for example, have one of the most interesting systems for determining sex, and because of it, if you are a male ant, you do not have a father. In an ant colony, there are dramatic divisions of labor. There are soldiers that defend the colony, there are workers that collect food, clean the nest, and care for the young, and there's a queen and a small group of male reproductives. Now, the queen will mate and then store sperm from the males, and this is where the system gets really interesting. If the queen uses the stored sperm to fertilize an egg, then that egg will grow up to become female. However, if she lays an egg without fertilizing it, then that egg will still grow up to be an ant, but it will always be a male. So you see, it's impossible for male ants to have fathers. And male ants live their life like this with only one copy of every gene, much like a walking sex cell. This system is called the haplodiploid system, and we see it not only in ants, but also in other highly social insects like bees and wasps. Since our own sex is determined by genes, and we do know of these other animals that have their sex determined by genes, it's easy to assume that for all animals, the sex of their babies still must be determined by genetics. However, for some animals, the question of whether it will be a boy or a girl has nothing to do with genes at all, and it can depend on something like the weather. These are animals like alligators and most turtles. In these animals, the sex of an embryo in a developing egg is determined by the temperature. In these species, the sex of the baby is not yet determined when the egg is laid, and it remains undetermined until sometime in the middle of the overall development period when a critical time is reached. And during this time, the sex is completely determined by temperature in the nest. In painted turtles, for example, warm temperatures above the critical temperature will produce females within the eggs, and cool temperatures will produce a male. I'm not really sure who came up with this mnemonic, but you can remember that when it comes to painted turtles, they are all hot chicks and cool dudes. For some tropical fish, the question of will it be a boy or will it be a girl isn't settled until even later in life. You see, clownfish all start out their lives as males. However, as they mature, they become female. They also spend their lives in small groups with a strict dominance hierarchy where only the most dominant male and female reproduce. And amazingly, if the dominant female in the group dies, the largest and most dominant male will then quickly become female and take her place, and all the other males will move up one rank in the hierarchy. In another very different ocean animal, the green spoonworm, the sex of the babies is determined by a completely different aspect of the environment. For this species, it is simply a matter of where a larva happens to randomly fall on the sea floor. If a larva lands on the open sea floor, then it will become a female. But if it lands on top of a female, then it will become a male. So for some species, the question of boy or girl is answered by genetics. For others, it's answered by the environment. And for others still, they don't even bother with the question at all. Take whiptail lizards, for example. For those desert lizards, the answer is easy. It's a girl. It's always a girl. They are a nearly all-female species, and although they still lay eggs, these eggs hatch out female clones of themselves. So will it be a girl or will it be a boy? Throughout the entire animal kingdom, it does really all depend on the system of sex determination. For humans, that system is a genetic XY system. And for me and my wife, we found out it's going to be a baby boy.
All right, so that's the end of the notes. We'll do a few things with meiosis, a few worksheets and stuff like that, but basically it's mitosis. It's an egg or sperm, and it goes through mitosis twice, and it's called meiosis. If you need anything from me, let me know, and I will get back with you.